Rogers. Everybody finds it fun. There he is. Okay, so that takes us to item 4 on the agenda. Items for information, city council meeting, council preview, Mr. Trivett.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So on Thursday, we have a pretty full agenda. We have a lot of public hearings. The first two have to do with Strange Ways Brewing, accommodating them and a space at High Street. And then we have a text amendment to allow for administrative approvals for extension of special use permits by not more than 180 days. Then we have two budget-related items. The first is creating a stabilization fund in the CIP, and the second is accepting funding through ARPA from the Virginia Tourism Corporation. Under unfinished business, we will consider the street resurfacing plan.
And do some events back in town. So as you'll see here, we started the year with July 4th, which is always just right after the beginning of the year. And so that event is now becoming sort of a tradition. So we started that with Good Shot Judy. We went on to the Summer Breeze concert series, which came back strong this year on the lawn of the museum. And we had anywhere between 300 and 1,100 people for that event. And so a lot of new events that really were exciting to get back to, should I say. The fireworks on July 4th always start around 9 o'clock. And so what we've done with that event is basically we tried to do some music earlier in the afternoon, and we found that it's just too warm, too hot out there. And so we're hoping that this next year we can get back to, I know a couple of years ago we tried a hot air balloon on the lawn right there, which was really cool, a big visual, and about 60 to 80 people were able to take a ride in that balloon, and it would just go up and come back down. So it didn't get to fly anywhere, it just goes up and down. So we're hoping we may be able to bring that back this year. But for last year, we estimated close to 5,000 people were out on the lawn for that Good Shot Judy concert. And they stay obviously through the fireworks and then disperse after that. So that's definitely a great event. It's free to the public. I think it's very hard for us to tell how many of them are out of town and how many from, because it's a free event. And as I've said that before, it's very difficult for us to get those numbers. But it was probably, a good 50-50 of visitors to town and having the hotel, motel association and those type of guys let people know that there's something happening really helps us out with attendance levels for that type of event. Summer Breeze concert series, basically, as high as 1,100 people it's very, very weather dependent. It's in the summer, it starts in June, goes all the way through sort of the first week in September. We have a couple of food trucks. We had it on the other side of the lawn, on Nassau Street side. The downside of that was the bright sun on the band when it's really like almost 9,500 degrees. So, but again, really well attended, used all of the local breweries again, and food trucks. The bus wrap project, which I mentioned last time we were here, I think last time I was here, it was just in the phase of actually going through the competition cycle. So you'll see those are the two buses that we had wrapped. One was a professional artist and one was a young lady who did her design. And we still see them right now. In these last couple of weeks, I've seen them a lot actually riding around town. So we get a lot of comments on our Facebook page about people seeing the buses and like making them smile and happy as they ride around town. So it's like, visual art, art that's actually moving around town. So it's getting very close to the 6-month phase of them actually unwrapping those buses, unfortunately. But because it was so successful, I'm not sure we'll make it an annual thing, but probably definitely every other year if it's not an annual event. So that one was really well taken. So Scrumptious Week, we started that years ago, and it used to be in April, and we've sort of pushed that back to the November time. So that's when the original food festival we tried to get going. The harvest celebration was many years ago. So we've actually gone back to where that was, which is November time, which means the Chowder Festival is sort of like the anchor event for that weekend. This last year, we tried to extend it out over 2 weekends because Precarious was doing their big Field Days event. And so we shared the tent with those guys, and they sort of kicked off the week. And we did a country music concert, which was, again, very well attended. It was about 500 people came to that. That was a ticketed event. And then we did a midweek concert with Bobby Blackhat and an all-star band, which, again, was a free, sort of like a summer breeze, but, you know, a bigger version of that. So that was really cool. And then the Saturday following that, we did a community yoga event where we brought in a yoga instructor from North Carolina and a drummer from Richmond. And we had about 60 people attend the free yoga session at 9 o'clock in the morning, which was great to kick off that day. And then we had the Chowder Festival and then the Knocktoberfest the following day, which is an Oktoberfest, but it was in November, so we called it Knocktoberfest. So again, that's a well-attended event, and really do get some people who love the traditional German attire and German food. And you know, we had it was well attended, but again, all of our events have, you know, struggled a little bit with selling tickets this year. I'm going to be very honest. You know, that's just the nature of the business now. It's really, really difficult. There are a lot of events happening in town, so, and in the surrounding areas. The Christmas market, this was our second year, so it was great. We took it from 9 days to 19 days, so it was open 19 days. So Thursday, we started Black Friday for that weekend, and then every weekend after that, it was Thursday through Sunday, and then the 3 days leading up to Christmas. And we bought 14 more chalets, so we're up to 34 chalets now. It was in the same location, and we count everybody that comes through there, and overall it was just over 45,000 people came through during that period in December. So that was a pretty large increase from the year before. Obviously some of those are repeat because some of the locals come multiple times. The vendors change out, so each time there's a time block of 4 days. Some vendors do the whole time frame, some actually just do one weekend, 4 days. And so there is some changeover, which means that people coming back multiple weekends, you get to see different vendors selling different items. And obviously we have live entertainment for those as well. Then we have the New Year's Eve community celebration that we've done one time before COVID. And so, and this one, the attendance again was down a little bit, but it was still about 650 people, which was a very large tent on the lawn. I think again, you know, I recognize a lot of the people coming back to these events, and so they, you know, it's starting to become a tradition for what we do here in Williamsburg for a free event on New Year's Eve. Now that first night is no longer here. So the Winter Blues Jazz Festival, now that was its 8th year. We did all of the event at the Williamsburg Lodge, so we did away with the tent that used to be like right in behind the Blue Talon area. It's always challenging at that time of the year in January to do a tented event. So I'm bringing the artists in, some higher profile artists, which we're trying to do. It's even more challenging trying to keep them comfortable in a tent in January. So we did everything in the lodge, Williamsburg Lodge. And again, attendance levels were down a little bit, but we're still bringing people in. There are same people coming back year after year for that event, and they're traveling from Maryland, they're traveling from, you know, New England to come to that event. There are some couples now that they started with 2, it went to 4 to 6. There's now a group of 10 that will basically, people fly in from different parts of the country. They'll put them up for the week. People meet each other at this event. It's really a really cool community type event where locals get to know people who are traveling in from out of town, and then they actually, you know, invite them back to stay at their home and that type of thing. It's really pretty cool. So we've seen a lot of that. Pop-ups. We just did the Brill Music Festival, which was just a few weekends ago. The beer festival, the Williamsburg Craft Beer Festival, that was down on the lawn right here across the street up until a few years ago before COVID. They came back this year. And so we had talked to them because we combined with them, you might remember a few years ago, we combined with them with a very large tent right here across the street. We couldn't get this location, so we went to the lawn and museum. But again, having that really large tent come in for that beer festival, you know, we decided to try to piggyback that for funding reasons to try and offset costs and share that tent. So we put on a festival called the Brill Music Festival, Brill is just short for brilliant. It's a British thing, just a fun, new, different name. And so with that event, we tried the yoga. We just had a local instructor and a local drummer. It was great. We had over 50 people for the yoga. We had 40 people, 45, and for the drumming session, which we did a drum circle at 11 o'clock that morning, and we had about 50 people. So, which again, that was really cool because we had kids that were 2 or 3 years old, and then we had older, generation grandparents that were maybe in their 70s, and so everybody, interacting together was really cool to see. And then we did like 3 different genres of music in the afternoon. We did bluegrass music, then we did some reggae music, and then we did like British invasion music in the evening. And so again, throughout the day, by the time we got to the last event, we were probably at around 400, 450 people under the tent. We chose to make that event free at the last minute, about a week out, because again, ticket sales were very slow about 10 days out. And even though we always know that that last week is when you sell quite a lot of tickets, we just decided it wasn't gonna, really suffice. So we decided to change it and make it a free event. So that's one of the things that it's a new challenge. It's a new challenge since COVID, that a lot of people are using events as marketing. So whether it's a brewery, whether it's a winery, whether it's just a destination, they're actually putting events on for free. So when we travel now, you go to DC, there's just free events, there's free music all around town. And so it's just something we're having to try to work out and learn as we move along as to how we're going to try and do these events. Because the tickets for Brill were $20 with a drink included, so it wasn't like an expensive event, but it still was, very low sales. And so, but once we made it free, and by the end of the day, as I said, 450 people came out. So it was a great event. So it's just trying to work around that challenge of how do we financially do that, and is that something that council wants, the city to have, those free events because out of the Brill, we know we gave out that morning, we went down to the farmer's market, and we gave out, flyers for the music event for that evening to tourists and things that were walking on Duke of Gloucester Street, and they basically, we recognize those same people coming to the event that evening. So if tourists are in town, they want something to do, they basically came and sat and listened to the music that evening. So, at the same, we're not necessarily getting money from them for the event, but they're leaving town excited that they had a better experience because they went to an event while they were here. So those are the types of things we have to kind of look at. And coming up, we have the Queen's Jubilee, Platinum Jubilee, where she's been on the throne for 70 years. And so I was asked by a gentleman at the college who's a bagpiper if we would help coordinate and make an event happen that's on the June 2nd. So that's coming up pretty quickly. And that will be, again, we didn't have anything in our funding, but again, it's just something that out of our other funds that we have with under Culture Fix, we're going to help to make that happen. And so there'll be, right now we're at somewhere between 37 drummers and bagpipers. One bagpiper is loud, so you can imagine 37. They're all going to be in front of the Wren building. The college has agreed to let us use the Wren building as the backdrop, which is really cool because the Queen has been there twice and visited that location. And so we'll put some staging in front of there a little bit earlier in the evening at 6 o'clock. They're going to do a little short presentation in front of the, not the Capitol building, the Palace, and then they'll come over in front of the Wren building, and at 9 o'clock that evening, there's like a program with a speaker, and they'll be lighting some of the crescents. It's called a beacon lighting, which is done in England for most big events now that are to do with royalty. So, and then that whole weekend will just be, in England is going to be a huge weekend, but here that's, we decided to do that, and so that's another cool pop-up event. Next year, so starting this July, it's again a very similar schedule of events. The Summer Breeze Concert Series, July 4th, Scrumptious Week. We're looking at the Chocolate Affair and the Chocolate Chariot Race, which some of you will remember from years gone by. It was a popular event. New Year's Eve, the Christmas market, sorry, New Year's Eve, Winter Blues Jazz Fest, and then a city mural project, which we're hoping to be able to, put in for one of the murals over in Midtown. I mentioned the Chocolate Affair just briefly. This was a really cool event that we did for 8 or 9 years. It was always around February time, and so we're actually thinking of trying to put it under Scrumptious, under that same week, so we can try, if we have the Chowder Festival, we have the Chocolate Affair. Again, we're really trying to create that food festival for the town, but it's really difficult because, you know, with all the restaurants struggling and that type of thing, it's hard for them to donate and give time and, you know, put resources to it. But this way, I think we know how the Chocolate Affair works. It worked really well. And then the Chocolate Chariot Race was a race that we would do in the morning. And people dress up, and it's just a fun event. So that's very different. That's pretty much my presentation for now. I'm here for any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rose. As a veteran of the Chocolate Chariot Race, I can tell you, it is a lot of fun. Mayor Freiling and Councilman Foster and I ran it through Newtown, so look forward to having that in the city. A lot of fun. So thank you for all the events. You know, there's no question that, you know, without the efforts of Culture Fix and our partnership, a lot of what we see in downtown in terms of vibrancy wouldn't be there. And certainly that is something that I think this council wants to see continue in some form and fashion. And so we certainly look forward to having a relationship moving forward. So I don't have any questions, but maybe Vice Mayor Dent does.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rose, and just to add on to what the mayor said, obviously, thank you and Culture Fix for providing these experiences not only for locals but for tourists, and hopefully drawing some tourists to the area. And I don't have any questions, but obviously appreciate the work and the preview of the 2023 schedule moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So could you talk a little bit about coordination, both in planning, calendars, and marketing with some of the other organizations like the Hotel Motel Association, Visit Williamsburg, and our sports marketing leadership?
Yeah, Visit Williamsburg, we basically do put our events onto their calendar. So they have that calendar, which is, I would say that's probably the biggest calendar right now. The Chamber also has a calendar now, so we try to put our events on that. WI Daily, there's a lot of calendars in town, and that's the challenge, that a lot of people are not sure which one to go to. I'm not sure that we'll ever get to a point where there's just one. It's just, you know, everybody has their reason for having a calendar, whether they're selling advertising or what. But so we basically go into as many of those calendars as possible and put them in there. As far as working in Colonial Williamsburg, again, working with those guys, that's getting better. And now they've taken a lot of the marketing for like Merchant Square back under their own staffing with their own marketing. As opposed to having an outside marketing company. And so, again, that's brand new, that's just happened, and so for Summer Breeze, we're working with those guys, and so I think, you know, they've said, you know, any other events that you have, let us know, we'll hope to try to get the marketing from Colonial Williamsburg side as well, so that will be very helpful. The college, again, I'm not sure, they don't really have necessarily a calendar. Most of their events are geared towards their own alumni or the, you know, the college themselves, so you know, that's basically where we're at. You know, our marketing, I mean, because we don't want to spend too much of our budget on marketing. There's a very small part of our budget is spent on marketing, and so what we try to do is mainly social media and link in with a lot of other, you know, organizations in town with their social media.
What about the Hotel Motel Association?
Again, you know, what I try to do is we get cards printed, and so we'll actually drop them off, and sometimes they'll be able to put them throughout the hotels. And that's worked, you know, it has worked well in the past. It worked well for the Christmas market, where they would be able to give them out. So, again, it's just trying to coordinate those types of things. You know, I'm trying to do it over and over and get the information out to them. But Hotel Motel Association, I'm not sure that they have their own calendar of events. You know, they have a flyer and they have a newsletter that goes out, and so we'll try to get information into that newsletter that goes out through email. And again, with the city has their own calendar and their own newsletter, and so again, we try to make sure that they're up to date with what we're doing as well, so that locals know what's happening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and I agree with you on calendars. It's a never-ending chore trying to get everything coordinated and all the blogs and Facebook groups and everything else. So I appreciate the presentation, all the various events. Looking forward to Summer Breeze, starting June the
22nd,
22nd.
Yeah.
Okay,
right after Williamsburg Live.
all right, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Councilman Rogers, any questions?
Just a couple, Steve. I echo my council member colleagues in a note of appreciation for your work and your team's work in starting some of these traditions in Williamsburg and seeing them through. It's really neat to hear about some of the expansion your events have gone through from an attendance standpoint. One of my comments was you mentioned at the beginning of the year there being some competition in events with more going on. And I was just going to say, I hope you don't beat yourself up in that way too much, because of course the beginning of the year saw the Omicron variant too. So I imagine the New Year's Eve festival, the Jazz Festival, there was some trepidation still in the air from COVID, which will hopefully subside and lead to more folks coming for the regularly scheduled events in this next fiscal year. Two questions on public arts related matters. The first was that bus wrapping project. It always brought a smile to my face when I saw it drive around town. It was like a moving mural of sorts. And you mentioned that there was, I think, a couple more weeks of it going around, and then it will be dewrapped, and it potentially may not be continued the next year, but might be something that you all do every other year. Is there any reason that you don't plan to do it on a year-by-year basis?
No, and we may do it. I think in our budget for this year coming, we do have a community project line item in there. And so, again, we didn't specify bus wrap in there just in case there was something else cool and different that we could try. But WADA is definitely up for it. They really were excited about it. And so I think when we talked to them originally, we said maybe it's 6 months on, 6 months off, which would mean once a year. So it very well could happen again this year, yeah.
That's great. That's good to know. I'm sure from a budgetary standpoint, with it not being a revenue driver, there's considerations from your side, but certainly the big Culture Fix sticker on the back and on the sides lets people know, that that's a real project that you all were able to champion. The second is also mural related, but it's about the potential for your mural at Midtown Row. I was curious for an update there.
We basically, we created a mural that is the word Williamsburg. So that's the one that is basically throughout. You'll see it everywhere. It's in Richmond, it's in Staunton, it's in lots of different places. And so we've actually, talked to a mural artist in Richmond. He's one of the biggest guys there. It's called Night Owl, and he's done a lot of their things, and he's done the design for us. And so, we're just working through the process right now. And originally there was a different process in place, and we thought we may be putting that one on one of the buildings, but now the city has put out an RFP for the murals in Midtown, and so we're just basically now going to put that mural back in through that process, and hopefully then it'll end up on one of the walls, maybe the wall that's, I think, near Sal's, and on the side of Food Line there's a large wall right there, which may end up actually being better than the other wall on Marshall's, because what we're doing is one that really is the one that people would take a picture of themselves with Williamsburg behind them and post it on Facebook and social media and Instagram, that type of stuff. And so, again, at this point, I think it's just a new procedure that it's just being formed, and so we're just trying to work our way through that process. But we're excited. We want to do it. We've already retained the mural artist, for it, and so he's ready to go when we're ready. It's just now we have to just go through the process with the new committee.
I hope that'll work out for you all. William and Mary had a good event commemorating their augmented reality mural on the side of the library, and it'd be nice to replicate something like that as we bring in more public art to the city core. So again, Steve, thank you very much for your work and for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming forward.
Thanks.
Takes us now to a presentation and proposed FY budget, on the FY budget, FY23 budget. Mr. Trivett.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So what we thought we would do is talk about the budget and just give you an update. I don't intend to go through the entire presentation again unless City Council would like for me to, but I did want to hit the highlights of things that have changed since our last discussion of the budget. So, let's see, there we go. So these are the changes that occurred since we presented it to you last. We have been given new revenue estimates from the Commissioner of Revenue's office, and you can see there the changes to revenue at the bottom: $250,000 additional dollars in personal property, 64 from real estate, and 50,000 from B-Pole, for a total increase in revenues of $364,000. And this is really good news because, as I told you when we presented the budget, there were a couple of things in the budget that are still underfunded. Some things on the capital side that are underfunded, but also on the operating side. In the operating side, the money for this additional revenue will largely go to the personnel contingency, which is how we pay for changes in personnel salaries. So I told you a lot about our plan to increase government salaries in Williamsburg to be competitive in the region. We talked a lot about the changes that we already made to public safety and that those are included in the budget, and told you that we needed to continue to focus on changing our salaries in the rest of government, what I call general government salaries. I'd originally thought that based on the revenue we had available, we would have to break that process into 2 fiscal years, into 2 phases. It's disappointing because what we really wanted to do, and really is the crux of our plan, is to get on a 2-year cycle of looking at competitiveness so that we're not caught in a 5 to 7 year cycle of having to do a major change in compensation, which is what we're experiencing now with such high dollars. And so by having a standing committee review that information every 2 years, we can get on that cycle and have it be much more comfortable in terms of budgeting for it. So having this additional revenue to apply to that allows us to accomplish both phase 1 and phase 2 of our general government salaries plan. And you can see it there sort of spelled out. What we did is our standing committee went and looked at every single position. The committee included members from every single department. They looked at every position in general government and compared it to regional competitors. And where those regional competitors were not good comparisons for us because of size or scope of the organization, we then looked statewide and found good comparisons based on population or demographics or area served, and then scaled it back to meet our market salaries. The result was a recommendation from the committee for every single position in the city to be adjusted. Some positions, no adjustment was required, but many positions there was an adjustment, and that adjustment ranged from 1% all the way up to 15 or 16%. The average for the adjustments in the competitiveness category is 7%. Now, in addition, this money has allowed us to adjust for those people that didn't get anything in the competitiveness analysis. Will get a 5% cost of living increase. And as you all probably know, the federal government's estimate of cost of living this year is just at 7%. So that's not quite where we are, but we think that's offset by the quality of the increases that we've gotten in years past for COLA as well as merit. And then the last piece of the personnel contingency is adjusting our part-time salaries. One of the areas that we've had the hardest time recruiting has been part-time salaries, particularly those positions in Parks and Recreation that are seasonal in nature. Right now, the private sector, many companies are paying as much as $24 to $27 an hour for positions that are inside, working in air conditioning. And so for us to compete with them, hiring people to work outside, doing manual labor in the parks to keep the parks open and meet the needs of the community, as you can imagine, it's hard to get good quality candidates or keep quality candidates in those positions. So we'd like to move that hourly salary to $19 an hour, which will make us certainly more competitive with our colleagues in local government. Not quite as competitive as we could be in the private sector, but we think it'll address the shortage that we're currently experiencing. Parks and Recreation is our best example of that. They hire the majority of our seasonal part-time employees. Just today, Robbie, our Parks and Recreation Director, was telling me that at 5 o'clock she has to go sit in the lobby to man the front desk because we don't have a person to do that. So if we need her for a question, we'll have to bring her in from the desk outside. So this is an example of providing some relief in July for those positions. And then some other increases in the budget that are not necessarily substantial. Share of the courthouse cost, $84,000 is an increase there. Typically, they don't spend all of that money, but this represents budgeting a match for what James City County has budgeted. An increase in IT software maintenance, support of HRPDC. We got a revised estimate there, $587 more that is needed. And then we reduced the contingency in the budget by $67,000 to help achieve the goals of meeting these needs. So a little bit of a mix between the additional revenues and cutting some of the contingency lines that we had in the budget. So I'm gonna fast forward through the majority of our other presentation here. As you can see, the total budget has increased based on this new revenue to $117,841,346. Again, the majority of that is dedicated to compensation changes. Just gonna skip on ahead to one more slide. This slide, what's not included, because I think if we're talking about where can changes still occur, normally when we're preparing to adopt a budget in a few days, there aren't a lot of changes expected, but in this year's budget, there's an exception. So with the additional revenue, we're able to take the general government pay plan adjustment off of this list, which moves up unknown state funding plans, and that's still an issue. So the three things that are not included in this budget are, number one, the true cost of school capacity expansion project, and that's mainly because it's not yet defined. The second is any costs that might be incurred by the city as it relates to increased inflation. And then the third is unknown state funding plans. Normally by this point in the year, we have a state budget that's been adopted, and we know what the impacts of the regulations are going to be. This year we don't have that. So it is possible that we get some point during this fiscal year and have a state budget that's adopted that impacts expected revenue streams, that puts us back in a position of having to adjust the budget to accommodate for that. It'd be really easy for me to sit here and speculate all the different ways that that might occur. I think the number one example is what will happen with the grocery tax. And right now, it feels like whatever change they might make would at least keep grocery tax for local governments whole in the coming fiscal year. But again, it's not adopted yet, and so we don't know exactly what that might look like. It certainly looks like even though it might be whole in the first fiscal year, as we progress outward, it will become less and less of a revenue stream for us, and that maybe impacts future years in terms of budgeting to accommodate those decreases. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I don't know that I have any questions, but I certainly appreciate Master Commissioner Overy's efforts in resharpening a pencil and finding us some additional dollars. Obviously, it helps in meeting some of the other needs of the city. But just as a point of reference, I had lunch with other mayors and chairs in the region, and one of the common thread in the discussion with them was the challenge of employee retention, employee pay, and kind of a uniform discussion about how each of them are having to raise their rates of pay for their employees as well. And so I'm glad, and I think it's justified that we allocate these funds to meeting those needs of the staff. So, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tribute. One question, could you just talk a little bit more about, I know you mentioned Robbie's got to leave here to go man the front desk, but how that's had an impact, like maybe on Waller Mill Park? And
Certainly. Yeah, I don't think you have to look very far to find the impacts of the worker shortage, and particularly in part-time positions. So Waller Mill Park, we've had to adjust the hours there and actually close a day or two, and are looking to close another day in the next week or so, every week moving forward until we are able to fill those positions. We just don't have the staff to man everything that's required by Parks and Recreation.
And based on some of the information we have from other outside organizations that are have part-time employees, hopefully this is going to solve some of the problem, but they're still paying even more than that for part-time employees.
Yeah, I mean, we're very hopeful that this change doesn't take place until July 1st. So we've got to still make it a month and a half about to get to this. My hope is that we're able to attract some employees that see that this change is on the horizon. I think the approval of the budget on Thursday, if that's what the council elects to do, will allow us to start marketing that to prospective employees and get them on board sooner at a lower rate of pay, knowing that the higher rate of pay is coming July the 1st. But as you say, we're still not as competitive as we could be with the private sector. So it's hard to say exactly how much impact this will have, but it certainly gives us a leg up over some of our close by competitors for talent.
And all the other details that you've provided, we've discussed, and I don't have any additional questions, but I too would like to thank the commissioner for the adjusted numbers to bring us more revenue so we can address some of those items that we weren't able to originally address in the proposed budget.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So, as we all know, our residents and businesses are probably facing unprecedented inflation now. And although we're seeing the real estate assessments going up about an average of 12%, some neighborhoods such as ours are increasing closer to 18%. So the revenue windfall to the city, which is good for us in our budget, can be challenging for our taxpayers. So we're part of the problem in terms of inflation. So reducing the real estate tax rate from the current rate of 64 cents to 62 cents should provide about a 3% decrease in the real estate bills due next December, right? 3.125%. So that'll help a little bit in terms of us being part of the problem. But I think that we need to recognize that it is going to be a burden on the taxpayers. Barb?
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Again, would like to express my appreciation to Commissioner Overy for the additional numbers. I agree that we've all talked about the shortage of staffing and not only what the compensation is, but what the next job on the horizon holds for people. I mean, there's not the loyalty that I think my generation sort of enjoyed, and so it's always a little greener pasture. So it is a constant struggle, and I think we're all facing inflation, not just residents, but also the city. You know, someone commented, well, the city doesn't have inflation, but I think when you think about the cost of gasoline for city vehicles versus, you know, we have to pay for that, and a lot of other factors fall into the city having higher cost. And I think, too, that one of the first slides you had shown us in a presentation was that the increased revenue that we received from our increased assessments was basically eaten up by expenses that we had. So even though it brought in additional revenue, we weren't able to really have that available for some of the things we wanted. So it's a constant balance and struggle, and again, thanks to you and to Finance Director Dameron and her staff for all that you do for that. So,
Mr. Rogers?
Thank you. This, I think, is the third time it's been in front of the public, at least, and fourth or fifth that council has seen this. So I have no additional questions except to extend again a note of gratitude to you, Commissioner Overy, for again looking at the numbers and being able to hear now a little later in the game let us know that we can go ahead and fund the phase 1 and phase 2 of general government salary increases. To Councilman Ramsey's point, I agree that there is inflation seen everywhere. We've certainly felt it in some of our major infrastructure projects, but I think for our city manager Trivett, our director Dameron, and council colleagues, it's the city trying to be, as I would characterize it, a bit of the solution instead of the problem in lowering our real estate and personal property tax assessment rates. No additional questions for me, except thank you for all who've worked so hard on this budget.
Okay, so there's no action required there. So if there's no other comments or questions for the staff, we'll move on. City Council communications. Anybody have any meeting? You have in the agenda there an item of demonstrates all of the different meetings that we have this month. It's there for the public to take a look at, and hopefully they'll get out and participate in some of those meetings. Now it takes us to an open forum, which is an opportunity for anybody to come forward. Anybody like to come forward and address council? Seeing none, we'll close the open forum and takes us to adjournment. Motion?
Yes, I move that city council work session for May 9th be adjourned.
Second.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Mr. Maslin?
Aye.
Adjourn.